I pulled up to my storage unit at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the roll-up door was already 6 inches off the ground. I hadn't been there in 3 weeks. Nobody else had a key. The lock I had put on it was gone. Not cut, gone. No broken metal on the ground. No shackle, no remains. Just the empty latch where the lock had been, and 6 inches of darkness visible underneath the door. I sat in my car with the headlights pointed at the unit for a long time. Then I did the thing every person in a horror movie does, that you scream at them not to do. I got out and lifted the door. I need to explain why I was at a storage facility at 11 p.m. I was 26, going through a divorce. I had moved most of my stuff into a 10 by 15 unit at a place called Easy Store on the south side of town. One of those facilities with rows of orange garage doors and a keypad gate and one security camera that points at the entrance and nothing else. I was renting the unit month to month while I figured out where I was going to live. Most of my belongings were in there: furniture, boxes of clothes, my computer setup, some stuff from when I was a kid that I didn't want to lose. That night I had driven over because I needed my winter coat. The temperature had dropped fast and everything warm I owned was in Unit 29. It should have been a 10-minute trip. It wasn't. When I lifted the door, the overhead light inside the unit clicked on automatically. Everything looked the same at first glance. My couch against the back wall, stacked boxes on the left, the desk and chair on the right. But as I stepped inside, I noticed something. The boxes had been rearranged. Not dramatically, subtly. The stack on the left had been 5 boxes high. Now it was 4. The missing box was on the floor near the couch, open. The flaps were folded back. Someone had opened it and looked through it. I walked over and checked inside. It was the box with my photo albums, my wedding photos, pictures from college, family stuff. Everything was still there, but it had been rifled through. The albums were in a different order. Some of the photos had been pulled out of the sleeves and placed back loosely, like someone had been looking at them. Subscribe if you haven't already. This is about to get much worse. Drop a like too. 1 second. I checked the other boxes. 2 more had been opened. One was my clothes. Nothing seemed missing, but everything had been moved around. The other was my computer equipment. My old laptop was still there, but it had been taken out of its case and placed on top of the box. The screen was open, not powered on, just open, like someone had tried to use it or had been looking at it. I stood in the middle of my storage unit, feeling violated in a way I didn't know a storage unit could make you feel. Someone had been in here. Someone had gone through my personal belongings, my photos, my clothes, my laptop. The intimacy of it was what got to me. This wasn't a smash and grab. Nothing valuable was missing. Whoever did this wasn't looking for things to steal. They were looking at my life. I called the facility's after-hours number, a recording. I called the police non-emergency line. An officer came out about 40 minutes later. He looked at the unit, he looked at the missing lock. He checked for signs of forced entry on the door. There were none. He told me that storage unit break-ins were common and that I should get a better lock. He didn't seem concerned about the boxes being opened and nothing stolen. He said sometimes people break into units looking for electronics or jewelry and leave when they don't find anything valuable. I told him my laptop was right there. He shrugged. I bought a new lock the next day, a heavy-duty disc lock that cost $45. I also bought a cheap trail camera and mounted it inside the unit on top of one of the stacks facing the door. Battery powered, motion activated. I wanted to know if anyone came back. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The camera captured nothing. The lock was untouched. I started to relax. I started telling myself it was a one-time thing, some random person who got lucky with my cheap lock and rifled through a few boxes looking for valuables and left when they didn't find any. I almost convinced myself. Then on a Friday night, I checked the camera's SD card and found 14 photos, all taken between 1 and 3 a.m. the previous Wednesday. The first photo showed the door being lifted from the outside. My $45 disc lock was somehow gone again. The second photo showed a person ducking under the door. The person was wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. I couldn't see a face, just a build, average height, thin. In the next few photos, the person walked through my unit slowly. They touched things. They ran their hand along the back of my couch. They opened a box of my clothes and held up a shirt like they were looking at it. Then they went to the photo box again. They sat on my couch. They took out a photo album and opened it on their lap. The camera captured them sitting there looking through my photos for what appeared to be several minutes based on the timestamps, flipping pages, stopping on certain photos longer than others. At one point, they pulled a photo out of the sleeve and held it up close to their face. I zoomed in on the trail camera image. The photo they were holding was from my wedding. It was a photo of my ex-wife. They held it for over a minute based on the timestamps between frames. Then they put the album back, stood up, walked to the door, and left. They closed the door behind them. In the last photo before they ducked out, they turned their heads slightly and the camera caught a partial profile. Male, maybe 30s or 40s. I didn't recognize them. It was nobody I knew, nobody from my life, nobody from my ex-wife's life. A complete stranger sitting on my couch at 2 a.m. looking at photos of a woman he had never met. I brought the photos to the police. They looked at them and agreed it was concerning. They said they would increase patrols around the facility. They also told me something I didn't know. The facility had been flagged before. 3 other tenants in the past year had reported similar incidents. Units opened, items moved, nothing stolen. The police hadn't been able to identify the person responsible. I asked why the facility hadn't told me this when I rented the unit. They didn't have an answer. I moved everything out that weekend. I rented a different unit across town with 24-hour cameras and a staffed office. Before I left, I checked the inside of my old unit one more time. It was empty. All my stuff was loaded in the truck, but sitting on the concrete floor in the back corner was something I hadn't put there. A Polaroid photograph, face down. I picked it up and turned it over. It was a photo of me, taken through the windshield of my car, at night, in the parking lot of the storage facility. I was sitting in the driver's seat looking at my phone. The timestamp on the bottom of the Polaroid said it was taken 3 days before the first break-in. They had been watching me before they ever opened my door. They knew what I looked like. They knew my car. They knew when I came and went. And after I moved everything out and returned the key and drove away from that facility for the last time, they wanted me to know that.
I bought an abandoned storage unit at auction for $275 and found a room that someone had been living in, not stored things in, living in. There was a mattress on the floor with sheets and a pillow. There was a jug of water, a battery-powered lantern, a bucket that I don't want to describe. And on the back wall there were photographs taped in rows, over 40 photographs, all of the same woman, all taken from a distance, all taken without her knowledge. If that first paragraph didn't make your stomach drop, then you're braver than me. Let me tell you how I ended up standing in that unit. I'm 34. I got into storage unit auctions about 2 years ago after watching too many YouTube videos about people finding valuable stuff in abandoned units. The reality is much less glamorous. Most units are full of junk, broken furniture, bags of old clothes, random kitchen appliances from the 1990s. You're lucky if you break even, but it's a hobby, and I enjoy the treasure hunt aspect of it. This particular auction was at a facility outside of Jacksonville, Florida in November of 2023. There were 8 units up for auction that day. Most of them were clearly junk. You could see it through the partially open doors, trash bags, stained mattresses, the usual. Unit 14 was different. The door was opened the minimum amount required by law, maybe 2 feet. Inside you could see what looked like furniture covered in blankets. It looked like someone had stored decent stuff and then stopped paying. I bid $275 and won. Nobody else wanted it. When I lifted the door fully, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot, not mildew, body odor, stale sweat. The smell of a person who had been in an enclosed space for a long time without ventilation. The furniture I had seen from outside was real. A small table, a folding chair, but behind it, against the back wall, was the mattress, twin size, on the floor, with a fitted sheet and a flat sheet and a pillow with a pillowcase. Next to it was a gallon jug of water half empty, the lantern, a plastic bag with food wrappers inside, granola bars, crackers, canned soup with a pull tab. Someone had been eating and sleeping in this unit. Then I saw the wall, the back wall of the unit behind the mattress, photographs taped in neat rows, 4 rows, about 10 or 12 photos per row, all printed on regular printer paper, all of the same woman. She looked to be in her 30s, brown hair, average build. The photos were taken in different locations: a parking lot, a grocery store, a gas station, an apartment complex. Some were taken from inside a car through the windshield, others from across a street. In every single one, she was unaware, shopping, walking, pumping gas, getting her mail, going about her daily life, while someone stood close enough to photograph her and far enough away that she never noticed. I backed out of the unit. I called 911. I told them what I found. 2 officers arrived in about 15 minutes. They looked at the unit. They photographed everything. They called a detective. The detective arrived about an hour later. She went through the unit carefully. She took down the photographs and bagged them. She checked the mattress and the food wrappers for fingerprints. She asked me a lot of questions. Had I touched anything? Had I moved anything? Did I recognize the woman in the photos? I didn't. She told me they would look into the previous tenant's identity through the facility's records. I found out more about a week later when the detective called me back. The unit had been rented 8 months earlier by a man who paid in cash. He had used an ID that turned out to be fake. The facility had no working cameras covering that row of units. The man had stopped paying 2 months before the auction, which is how the unit ended up on the block. The detective told me they had identified the woman in the photographs. She was a local. She lived about 4 miles from the storage facility. When they contacted her, she broke down. She told them she had felt like she was being watched for months. She had noticed the same car parked near her apartment on multiple occasions. She had seen someone she didn't recognize at her grocery store more than once. She had filed 2 reports about being followed, but the police hadn't been able to confirm anything. The photographs on the wall confirmed everything she had feared. Someone had been stalking her for at least 8 months, documenting her movements, tracking her routines, and sleeping in a storage unit 4 miles from her apartment, surrounded by her photographs, like some kind of shrine. The man was never identified. The fake ID led nowhere. The cash payments were untraceable. The detective told me that the woman had since moved to a different city. She asked me not to share any identifying details, which I won't. But she did tell me one last thing that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said when they examined the photographs more closely, they noticed that the most recent ones weren't taken from a distance. They were taken from close, very close, 5 feet, 3 feet. One of them appeared to be taken from directly behind the woman while she was standing in line at a coffee shop. He was getting closer. Over 8 months, the distance between them had been shrinking, and whoever he was, he's still out there, with a different ID, probably at a different facility, probably with a new wall.
My storage unit shared a wall with Unit 17. I never thought about that until the night I heard breathing coming through the drywall. Not a vent, not pipes, breathing, slow and steady on the other side of the wall. at 10 p.m. in a facility that was supposed to be empty. I was 30. I had rented the unit for about 6 months. I used it mostly for seasonal stuff, holiday decorations, summer gear, camping equipment. I'd go maybe once a month to swap things out. The facility was a newer one, climate-controlled, indoor hallways, electronic access, security cameras at every hallway intersection. It felt more like a hotel than a storage place. Each unit had a metal roll-up door, and the walls between units were standard drywall over metal studs, not concrete, not cinder block, drywall, which means sound travels. I was there on a Thursday night in October of 2024. I had come to grab my Halloween decorations. I was kneeling on the floor, digging through a bin, when I heard it, a rhythmic sound from the other side of the wall I shared with Unit 17. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Human breathing, not mechanical. Not a fan or an HVAC system. I could hear the slight catch at the top of each inhale, the way a real person breathes when they're trying to be quiet but can't control it completely. I froze. I knelt there with my hand inside a bin of fake spider webs, and I listened. The breathing continued, steady, maybe 15 breaths per minute. Whoever was on the other side of that wall was calm, not panicking, not exerting themselves, just existing, quietly. In a storage unit at 10 at night, I stood up slowly and pressed my ear against the wall. The breathing got louder, clearer. I could hear other sounds too. Small movements, fabric shifting, like someone adjusting their position on the floor. Then the breathing hitched, like the person had sensed something change, like they knew I was listening. The breathing stopped. Complete silence. I held my ear against the wall for another 30 seconds. Nothing. Then, from the other side of the wall, a voice, a whisper, so quiet I almost missed it. It said, "I can hear you too." I pulled my ear off the wall like it was on fire. I stood in my unit, staring at the wall. My heart was slamming. I grabbed my phone and walked out into the hallway. I looked at Unit 17's door. It had a lock on it, a standard padlock, the same kind the facility sells at the front desk. I walked to the front office. It was closed. The electronic access system doesn't require staff. You badge in and out on your own. There was nobody to tell. I called the facility's main number, voicemail. I called the non-emergency police line. I told them someone was living in a storage unit. They said they'd send someone when available. I went back to the hallway and stood outside Unit 17. I put my ear close to the door. I could hear the breathing again, faintly, through the metal. Whoever was in there was still there, still breathing, still aware that I was on the other side. I wanted to leave. Every rational part of me said walk away and let the police handle it, but I couldn't stop thinking about something. The voice, "I can hear you too." It wasn't threatening, it wasn't angry. It was matter of fact, like a statement of mutual acknowledgement. I'm here, you're here, we both know it now. The police arrived about 45 minutes later. 2 officers. I explained the situation. They went to Unit 17 and knocked on the door. No response. They knocked harder. Nothing. One of them called the facility's emergency maintenance number and got authorization to cut the lock. They cut it with bolt cutters and lifted the door. The unit was dark. One officer pointed his flashlight inside. Against the back wall, there was a sleeping bag, a pillow, 3-gallon jugs of water, a pile of canned food, a battery lantern, a small pile of clothes folded neatly, and a phone plugged into a portable charger. Someone had been living there, but they weren't there now. The unit had no other exit, one door, no windows, no vents large enough for a person. The officers checked the entire space. Empty. I told them I had heard breathing and a voice less than an hour ago. They looked at each other. One of them checked the hallway cameras with the maintenance guy who had arrived. The camera covering that hallway showed nobody entering or exiting Unit 17 that entire evening, not while I was there. Not before, not after. The only person on the footage walking that hallway was me. The maintenance guy told the officers that Unit 17 had been rented 4 months ago by a man who paid 3 months up front in cash. The 4th month's payment never came. They had sent notices but never followed up with a forced opening. As far as they knew, nobody had accessed the unit in over a month, but the sleeping bag was warm. The officers confirmed it. The fabric was warm to the touch, and the phone plugged into the charger was at 89%. Someone had been using it recently. The most recent call on the phone was from 6 hours before I arrived. The browser history showed local news sites and weather forecasts. Whoever had been living there wasn't hiding from the world entirely. They were checking the weather, reading the news, living a quiet, invisible life behind a metal door in a climate-controlled hallway, while people walked past every day carrying boxes and decorations, and never knowing someone was 6 inches of drywall away, listening to everything. Someone had been living in that unit, sleeping and eating and breathing right next to me every time I visited, and when I pressed my ear against the wall, they were right there, on the other side, listening to me the same way I was listening to them. The only difference is they already knew I was there. They had probably known for months. Every time I opened my unit and knelt on the floor and dug through bins and talked to myself the way people do when they think they're alone, they were on the other side of that wall, hearing everything, knowing my voice, knowing my schedule, knowing when I came and when I left, knowing I always came alone. And on that Thursday night in October, they decided to let me know. I can hear you too. 4 words, whispered through drywall. Not a threat, not a warning, an introduction, like they had been waiting for the right moment to say hello. Like we had been neighbors for months, and they were finally tired of the silence. I moved my stuff out the next day. I don't use storage units anymore. I keep everything in my apartment now. Even if it's crowded, even if there's barely room to walk, even if my closets are stuffed and my garage is full. Because at least in my apartment, I know what's on the other side of every wall. And there's no one breathing in the silence, and no one whispering back, and no one who has spent 4 months learning the sound of my footsteps, and the rhythm of my visits, and the way I hum to myself when I think I'm alone. But the part that really keeps me up is the cameras. The hallway cameras showed nobody entering or exiting that unit. Not that night, not any night, which means either the cameras were broken or whoever was in that unit found a way in that doesn't involve the hallway. Or they were already inside when the cameras were installed and they never left, and the sleeping bag and the food and the phone belonged to someone who was still in there when the police opened the door, someone who the officers somehow didn't see, someone who was standing in a dark corner of a 5x10 space while 2 flashlight beams swept past them, someone who wasn't hiding, someone who simply wasn't visible. I don't know which explanation is worse. All of them keep me awake. Those were 3 true storage unit horror stories. If you made it to the end, tell me which one is going to keep you awake. Drop it in the comments. If you rent a storage unit and you've experienced something disturbing, leave your story below. The most unsettling ones get featured in future videos. Subscribe if you haven't. New stories every week. Share this with anyone who has a storage unit. They might want to check on it tonight. And the next time you lift that door and step inside, remember something. You might not be the only person who has a key, and the walls are thinner than you think.